Just heard Samantha mention there were, 44 folks on the call. So are they from all over Nevada? Is that what I heard you say?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll do a quick introduction. I haven't presented probably to some of you. So again, my name is Logan Briscoe. I'm the supervisory law enforcement ranger for BLM Zone 1, which is Carson City and Winnemucca districts. So a little background about myself. I would say ARPA is probably, well, not probably, ARPA is my passion. Lucky for me, I got to spend about 10 to 11 years at the beginning of my career in Southwest Colorado. So specifically Mesa Verde country. I was the law enforcement ranger for Canyons of the Ancients National Monument. And in that role, I was able to work a lot of ARPA cases. I believe the Canyons of the Ancients National Monument, the estimate was over 40,000 archaeological sites in about 170,000 acre monument. So everywhere you looked, there were artifacts on the ground, there were sites, and unfortunately that came with people trying to remove those artifacts. So I was very busy down there. I think I worked over 60 ARPA cases in a little over a decade that I was down there. So transferred to Nevada, to Carson City here in 2014 in a supervisory role, which I do enjoy, but I definitely miss the field work and the protection of cultural resources that I did so much of in Southwest Colorado. So that's just a little bit of my background. So when I present you today, I decided, in talking to Samantha, she wanted more of an overall process of kind of how law enforcement conducts these investigations. So I kind of tailored my presentation to that. And I also provided some real world examples. One of them is from Colorado, and then the other two are actually here from Nevada. So thought that might be kind of neat to show you guys that these do exist. We do these investigations every year. And I wanted to just share some of our success stories on that end. So I will get started. So just real quickly, I did want to point out that, I've been very appreciative of the Site Steward program my whole career with BLM. And I truly do believe you guys play critical role in our ability to try to protect these sites. Law enforcement, we are few and far between. We do site monitoring, but not nearly as often as we would like. And I think Rachel would share a similar statement that even as archaeologists, they don't get out in the field as often as they would like. So you guys play a very significant role in getting to these sites and getting eyes on them. Really what we are looking for is not to hear from you. I don't say that meanly. I just, if we don't hear from you, that's good news because the sites are intact and they have not been vandalized. But if you do find vandalism, I just wanted to walk through quickly kind of what we would expect from you guys out there on the ground in your volunteer capacity. And really it's simple. Find it, report it immediately. But I'll go through some examples here. So any evidence of recent activity, and we're talking human activity here, I will say I've had stuff reported to me before that it turned out it was animal that had actually done the damage to the site. So as you guys have seen before, bears can do a tremendous amount of damage as they're out rooting around for food. And I've seen bears completely destroy cultural sites. But obviously, we didn't know that. And if you see any type of damage and you're not sure whether it's human or animal, go ahead and report it. That's not a problem. We'll go out and take a look and make our best determination. Any type of tools, obviously, any type of digging that you see, food containers, a lot of the sites that you guys are going to go to are probably more in the rural, remote category. So just anything that stands out that doesn't look natural is what we're looking for here. I've myself have found tools in sites. I think I have some pictures coming up to kind of show you that, where people have stashed kind of a tool cache. We found hidden food, I guess, containers that have been buried on site. So people are trying to disguise their presence, but they don't want to hike in their food every time they go in. So, you know, we've seen a little bit of everything, just anything unusual, anything that's human related. So here's just a quick example of the tool cache I just talked about. So as you can see, this is a rock overhang. There was a really pristine rock shelter approximately 20 yards away. And the way the sun was shining just happened to expose the wooden handle there of that hoe. And when we pulled the brush away, we found a screen sifter and then a brand new hoe that somebody had stashed on site. Kind of a catch-22 in this situation. We didn't necessarily want to leave it because we couldn't do 24/7 surveillance of the site. And we were afraid the day or two that we weren't able to watch this site, it was going to get vandalized. So ultimately we removed the items and tried to prevent the site from being vandalized further. So observations, I can't stress enough, the best piece of evidence that you guys could provide to us really is the license plate on a vehicle. You know, that is the biggest source of information that'll tie us directly back to at least a name, whether that person was there that day or not. It's a great starting point for our investigation. So as you're driving into your site, if you don't typically see vehicles, and as you're driving in, you come across the vehicle, maybe it's parked on the side of the road, maybe it's partially hidden behind a pinyon tree, anything that's unusual, I just ask you just take a quick picture. You don't have to get out and walk around the vehicle. Certainly not asking you to make contact if somebody is in or around the vehicle, but just try to grab that piece of information, snap that photo, and that's really been helpful for us in past investigations. The other observation I think here that's important, and just a little I guess advice that I've had success in patrolling on foot, doing foot patrols of canyons. If you take your time as you're approaching a site and you really stop and listen to your surroundings, you can hear people talking from a long distance. And so I would say as you're walking to these sites, think about maybe entering the area quietly. If you're with some other people, maybe keep your voice down to a whisper. And as you're approaching, just listen. If people are in the area, you're going to hear them. And then you can decide at that point, you know, whether you're going to get to a high point and try to get eyes on the voices, or leave the area, whatever decision you would like to make. But very successful in at least determining where the individuals are at by listening to their voices. Vehicle activity. So this is another one. If you're not used to seeing a lot of fresh tracks in an area, and then suddenly you go to check on a site and you see a bunch of recent vehicle activity, that's a clue. And the picture that I have there of the 2-track road with all the tracks on it, that was very unusual. Those tracks, that 2-track probably hadn't had anybody on it in a couple of years. And then suddenly there's all kinds of in and out traffic. That particular incident, we led to a pretty big ARPA investigation. And it all started really with seeing some unusual vehicle traffic in the area. The photo on the lower portion of the screen, that is the back of a pickup truck. And you may not be able to make it out, but next to the red gas can, there's some narrow probes, and those were actually being used as burial probes obviously you see the screen sifters. This was just in the back of a pickup truck. Somebody who had parked alongside the road, and a game warden actually observed this, made contact with the individual, and it led to successful ARPA prosecution. So I just throw that in there. All he did is pull up next to the truck and look in the back, and that was the beginning of a pretty good case. So vehicles definitely tell us a lot of information. Again, this vehicle here, parked in an odd location. I was on patrol, and when I approach, I see a bunch of artifacts on the back of the tailgate. Individuals were just down over the edge of the canyon, actually digging a site. So, you know, just clues. All started with the vehicle. You know, got the license plate there. I just throw that picture in there because it's a great tool for us to identify suspects. So if you do discover any type of looting or disturbance, really the key is to not investigate further. So the idea here is whichever way you came into the area, we want you to leave that same way. We don't want you to go walk around the site, conducting an investigation, put a bunch of your footprints down. You may unintentionally step on top of a pristine footprint that we would be able to capture as evidence and hold that against a potential suspect. So really it's stopping your tracks, but from that location, gather as much information as you can. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? But do keep in mind it is a crime scene. And, you know, so I throw these slides in here. This is actual photographs that I took during an active ARPA investigation. These individuals were actually digging burial sites. This is from Southwest Colorado, but I throw this in there because this happened in the middle of an afternoon on a Sunday. So this could very easily be something you guys run across as you're out hiking around in the backcountry. And, you know, how would you respond? In this instance, we'd obviously want you to leave the area, contact law enforcement immediately. If you are in a good position and you have a nice telephoto lens like I did here, and you feel like you can safely snap some photos, that would be fantastic. But just do whatever you are comfortable with. What we don't want is you putting yourself in a situation where you come in contact with the suspects. This photo here is actually in Nevada. It's in Washoe County. This is a photo of what turned out to be more of a historic dump site. But I just wanted to throw this in there. This is stuff that we come across as we're out patrolling. And you can see this individual has tools, has a shade awning, and was doing unauthorized excavation on public lands. So again, if you come across this, very important if you can get the license plate, but what we are not asking you to do is actually make contact, ask questions, and do any type of an interview. Safely extract yourself from the area and call law enforcement immediately. So again, this is a lot of the same. I know you guys do have reporting requirements through the Site Steward program. So absolutely follow those, fill out the forms, and you'll eventually email those in. But a lot of times what I've observed over the years is a steward will report something via email, and it may not get responded to for a couple of days. And by the time it's forwarded to law enforcement, it's a week later, and it's really something that we could have done something with had we had that information immediately. So I did provide our law enforcement dispatch contact numbers there. That is the best way for you guys to immediately get a hold of a BLM ranger. And this is statewide. So you can call either of those numbers, and they have a record of who is on duty, and they will get you in touch with a BLM law enforcement officer. And if it's a crime in progress, people are actively looting a site, then it's going to get an immediate response. So feel free, write those numbers down, plug those into your phone. For the most part, we have a ranger on duty 7 days a week within a couple of hours response time. So please keep those numbers handy. Obviously, if it's a law enforcement emergency that is not necessarily a BLM crime, call 911 as you normally would. These numbers are if you see something that's specific to BLM law enforcement. And then at that point, law enforcement will tie in with archaeologists and come up with a plan to respond to the area and investigate appropriately. All right, let me check time here real quick. All right, so you know, this would kind of begin the process, the explanation of how we work through our investigation. So, you know, I reported to law enforcement, now what? So as I just alluded to, we will tie in with our archaeologist, and as long as the scene is safe and secure and it's no longer active, then law enforcement will enter the site with the BLM archaeologist, because there's two things that have to occur. The first and most important from law enforcement's perspective is the actual collection of evidence. So any type of tools that are on site, anything that may be able to be fingerprinted, footprints, we need to do casting of footprints. All of that will be done first, and it'll be documented as a crime scene. As soon as we are done with that portion, then the archaeologist has to start collecting data so they can conduct the damage assessment. So it really doesn't make sense to do those separately. So law enforcement works jointly with archaeologists to complete both of those steps. Here's a photo of the individuals that I had pictures of earlier who were digging the burial site. So this is the aftermath. This is a photo of both law enforcement and archaeologists working together to actually do a damage assessment and collect evidence that was left behind. I will say that this was a very interesting excavation. Once they got down to where the human remains were, they were actually visibly upset because the site had previously been looted, and there was nothing of commercial value left by the time they got down to the bottom of this burial. So historical looting, probably 20, 30 years before the area had already been excavated. So now I'll get into a little bit more of the law enforcement side. Our policy, obviously, we have uniform patrol rangers who are out patrolling public lands, and then we have special agents, which is more of a detective. They do the longer term or felony level investigations on behalf of the BLM. So anything that is ARPA related has to be referred to special agents. So as soon as we have confirmed in the field that there has been an ARPA violation of ARPA, we'll involve the special agents. Oftentimes they'll come out with the archaeologist as well and be there for evidence collection. Special agents and rangers work together. Usually on these investigations, there's a need to do surveillance of public lands. Oftentimes it leads to search warrants, and it's a team effort, but the BLM special agent takes the lead on the investigation. All right, so the first case study, this happened in Southwest Colorado. Canyons of the Ancients National Monument, as I talked about earlier. So it all started with a member of a seniors club contacted BLM law enforcement and said that there was a hike that this outdoor club had been hosting, where they were actually hiking to a site and digging up human remains so that the individuals who were on the hike could see the remains, and then they were being reburied. I would file this in the category of when it first comes in, it's almost unbelievable that the information, and I'm always a little skeptical, but nonetheless, we started an investigation, and we actually found this advertised in the local newspaper. So BLM law enforcement actually had somebody go along with the hike in an undercover capacity, and that undercover officer was able to witness firsthand of the hiking guide, tour guide, if you will, actually excavating a human skull. And everybody who was on the hike had the opportunity to take pictures with the skull. Really bizarre. You know, human nature sometimes is hard to understand why anybody would want that. But nonetheless, that was documented. While they were on the site and looking at the skull, suspect made a comment to the undercover officer that he had also excavated a ladle, an Anasazi ladle that was back at his house. And if he would like the undercover officer, if he would like to see it, that he'd come over to his house and take a look. So obviously our undercover officer said, yeah, that'd be great. Goes over to the house, and he shows him the ladle that he removed illegally from the site. So again, this is just some photos of the actual site. So the picture on the left, just kind of what we used is we did surveillance in the area. We had several fixed surveillance points that we monitored our undercover officer as he was on the hike. The picture up on the upper right-hand corner is of the actual overhang where the burial was, and then the picture on the lower right, you can actually see the top of a skull that the tour guide was excavating. So a picture on the left is law enforcement after the hike had concluded, had to go in and document this as a crime scene. Our archaeologist, although not photographed, she was also there and assisted with the damage assessment. Pictures on the right are items that were discovered during the search warrant. You can see suspect did try to hide some of the items and mix them in with the silverware drawer. Just threw that in there because typically when we do a search warrant on an ARPA investigation, there are artifacts everywhere. A lot of people collect everything they find and they store it all over their house. So as I said, a search warrant was executed, artifacts were seized, and the suspect ultimately pled guilty to federal ARPA charges and had to forfeit his entire collection to the government. This is kind of an interesting one. In his subsequent interviews with the suspect, he didn't think that by digging up that skull, he didn't see that as an issue because he stated when he originally found it, it was already, half of the skull was already exposed. And because he was digging it up and reburying it every time, he did not necessarily think that that was a major crime. Obviously, to the ancestors, people who had cultural affiliation with that burial feel very strongly and differently about somebody digging up their ancestors. All right, so I put this slide on there just so everybody has a general understanding of how jurisdiction works on BLM lands. We work under proprietary jurisdiction. So the sheriff of whatever county we are working in, the sheriff's office has equal jurisdiction over public lands. So easiest way to put that is any state law that's a violation of state law in town also applies on public lands. There is no exclusive jurisdiction, whereas BLM is the only one who has law enforcement authority. local law enforcement has equal jurisdiction and authority of state laws on public lands. So oftentimes throughout these investigations, BLM law enforcement will encounter illegal weapons, drug charges, or any other state crime where we do not have the authority or jurisdiction over those crimes. And so we will involve the state and the sheriff's office at that time. Prosecution wise, obviously, if it's a federal violation, it would go through the United States Attorney's Office. If it's a violation of state law, it would go through the local district attorney's office for prosecution. And I have an example here of a case that will kind of highlight how these jurisdictions are applied. So this is Hidden Cave. This is just east of Fallon, Nevada. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this site. This was a case where individuals broke into the cave, which is locked up. And so they obviously vandalized the lock and gained access to the cave and did a lot of damage through graffiti and other damage to the site. So this all started with BLM archaeologist was trying to access the site and discovered that the exterior of the door, cave door, was open and somebody had gained illegal entrance. BLM Rangers and special agents responded, and as I said earlier, two things happened. Evidence was collected as part of the crime scene analysis, and then the archaeologist also conducted their damage assessment. In this one instance of vandalism, there was over $8,200 in damages that occurred. BLM issued a press release and offered reward money. We do have the ability to provide reward money using federal dollars, specifically for ARPA investigations. And we do this often because they can be successful. So in this particular case, a witness did come forward, was interested in getting some reward money, and ultimately provided information that led to identification of 6 suspects. BLM and Churchill County law enforcement both conducted the follow-up investigation. And this particular instance, although we did have federal charges, and this was a violation of the Archaeological Resource Protection Act, the state, because it was a joint investigation, was able to charge these individuals with felony charges, and they were graffiti related. But I just wanted to throw that out there that oftentimes it's not just a federal crime, it's a state crime. And sometimes the suspects will get charged at the state level. And a lot of times these conversations and negotiations occur between the United States Attorney's Office and the District Attorney's Office in terms of which charges are the most appropriate. I will also say you can be charged with state charges and federal charges for the same crime. So there could be parallel prosecutions that are occurring, and depending on the level of the crime, we have done that before, where you actually are charged by the state and by the federal government. So I threw this slide in here. This is a good example. This was from Hidden Cave, where you see a very pristine footprint. Luckily, because it's in a cave, it was well preserved. We did a cast of the footprint, and then the picture on the right is during the search warrant that we found the exact shoe that had been in the cave. So I put that in there because I think a lot of times, and I can understand why people don't think there's a whole lot of value in a footprint. But there certainly is, especially once we identify a suspect. You're able to at least link that individual to that location on a specific time period. All right, This case study here was in Alpine County, California. Some of you may have read about this in the newspaper. There was a news release that came out several years ago. This individual was doing excavation on federal land, so Forest Service, BLM, state land, private land property, didn't really matter. He was going anywhere and everywhere he could to excavate sites and obtain artifacts. So this is a good one here. Started with a witness just happened to see this individual digging in an archaeological site. So this could easily put yourself in that situation. You're out hiking around and you come across somebody actively engaged in looting. Investigation was initiated and by BLM and Forest Service on that particular instance. Several months later, California game warden, who's out patrolling. So this is now the second time where I've been involved with an investigation or aware of a game warden who actually provides us information related to ARPA violations. So they're key partners for us. Oftentimes they patrol the same areas that we do. So this game warden sees the subject digging in the site, actually makes contact with the subject, seizes evidence and the artifacts that had been removed. That led to a much larger investigation where rangers and special agents now conducted further surveillance of the suspect, locating additional damage areas, actually photographing the individual actively engaged in looting behavior. And after the individual left, they would go in, conduct a crime scene analysis, and then collect evidence from the site. Again, a photo here of a footprint that was found on site, and then the lower right-hand corner is the boot that made the print that was recovered from the suspect's house during execution of a search warrant. So a search warrant was served in 2014. Hundreds of artifacts were seized. A large amount of cash and a large amount of methamphetamine were removed from the house as evidence. So that was about 2013, 2014 timeframe. Sometimes the justice system doesn't move as quickly as we would like, and this is a good example of that. Oftentimes it has little to do with law enforcement. It just has to do with how busy the U.S. Attorney's Office is. So even though there was a search warrant executed, the suspect still remained free. No, he was not arrested. It was not formally charged. 2015, same suspect was observed, this time on BLM land. And at this point, people were kind of on the lookout for this individual. And were able to find the suspect's, again, shoe prints and discovered more excavated areas. So BLM law enforcement, again, conducted surveillance and led to another search warrant. So this would be the second search warrant on the same suspect, separated by a couple of years in time. This time, 5,800 artifacts were seized, along with other items that were related to the crime. More methamphetamine was discovered at the residence. And at this point, we actually did have some success, got the attention of the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he was ultimately charged and ultimately found guilty, sentenced to 1 year, 1 day in prison. So that was a felony conviction. Suspect had to pay $113,000 in restitution to the federal government for the damages that occurred to these cultural sites. So this here is a good local case up here in northern Nevada, Northern California. The suspect was going back and forth between the two states, but it all started with a member of the public seeing something suspicious, reporting it to law enforcement, and then some luck over the years with a game warden and then a Forest Service employee actually catching the individual in the act as well. So that is it. I know I'm a little bit over time here, but I will just leave it with, you know, you guys are very valuable. We can't be everywhere at once. And I just wanted to let you know that there are very successful ARPA cases that we do prosecute. You may not always hear about them, but a lot of these cases, we are solely dependent on members of the public who are out to be our eyes and ears. And I also want to just let you know that we do take these very seriously. And once these cases do come in, they're very high priority, high profile cases. And usually we get very good support from the U.S. Attorney's Office in these prosecutions. So my phone number is there. If you guys have any follow-up questions or ever want to chat about anything, feel free to give me a call. And with that, I will stop talking and kick it to you guys. If you have any questions, I may be out of time. Samantha will let me know. But yeah, appreciate you guys' time.
Yeah, Logan, you can answer some questions if anybody has them.
Okay.
I got
so.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm like, that's my job. So far, we just got a thank you. I think a lot of people who haven't seen you do a talk before about the different cases might still be processing the information you shared, because it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around some of those examples, because we don't really see through the program. We haven't seen a lot of things like that, like the hike, you know, and having somebody
Right.
handle human remains that way. So it says, just we appreciate your work.
I just have one comment.
Yeah.
And I think Logan covered it well, but the connection there of meth and looting, that these are pretty dangerous people, because they're out there. And I know when I went through our ARPA, it was what we call tweakers. They're out there, they can do it 24/7. You know, the drug keeps them awake. They're out there looting, doing whatever, and that you're dealing with some potentially pretty dangerous people. That and the caution is definitely the thing that you would want to do in approach them.
Yep, absolutely. And I probably have 4 or 5 other case studies that I've presented before to the site steward group. But we did have another case in Colorado where we actually had an individual who was on the run, a fugitive. But while he was out there, he didn't have any money to purchase meth. So he actually, while he was hiding out, was excavating cultural sites, and individuals were supplying him with food, water, and meth in exchange for artifacts. So it's wild, the stuff that we've come across. And a lot of other cases that we've made have involved meth. And at least when I was in Colorado, they referred to it as spring fever. And they got tired of being cooped up all winter. They would get strung out on meth, and they would go out and they would be so fixated on artifacts. They would, for 12 hours straight, they would pick up every single artifact that they found. So there is certainly a tie to methamphetamine, but I've also had cases against doctors and lawyers. So it really is all walks of life who are involved in this type of activity.
So we have a good question here. So what happens to the artifacts that are recovered?
That's an excellent question. I will actually refer that to Rachel.
So it depends. It depends. They anything that we excavate through the Section 106 process that Jake talked about earlier, under what we call an ARPA permit, where you have archaeologists have a permit to excavate a site that an agency needs to have excavated for a reason, that has to go into museums. But artifacts recovered from looting aren't covered by those requirements. And so we have some freedom in what we do with them. Often they're not of much value as museum collections because we don't know enough about them. Sometimes, like the famous case with the doctor in California who was removing things, he kept really careful notes of where he got things. And so it may be that a museum or that a researcher might be able to do a lot with those. Other times we get 5-gallon buckets full of artifacts that have been taken from a 1,000 square mile area, and that's hard for us to do too much with. But like the projectile points I showed you some of earlier, all the obsidian ones out of that collection, we took thin sections from and did, Brian Hockett did this, our state lead, XRF, like identifying where the obsidian came from, and then with that data, hydration rind measurements to try to determine age of the artifacts, to then expand on research of what projectile point types fall into what age ranges. And so we were able to do that, but only on the obsidian ones. So there was some research gotten from that. And then the Washoe tribe is the tribe who that case, the vast majority of that happened in their homeland. And so I know that we've been talking to them about giving things back to them for them to do whatever they choose to do, rebury them in a secret location that's not on BLM land, use them for education, put them to rest spiritually somehow, that's up to them. And so I think if they haven't already gone to the Washoe tribe, our hope is to be able to do that at some point whenever we're done with all the legal process. And then there's a couple things from that we know specifically where they came from, and we're hopefully going to be able to either put them back or give them to a different tribe that has a relationship with that area.
Okay, there was another question. Do you visit schools to do education outreach? I think that's for Logan, or it might be for all of us.
Yeah, so we haven't done anything since I've been in Nevada. Colorado, we did. My office was in the Anasazi Heritage Center Museum, so we had a lot of educational artifacts and kits that we could take out to the schools. So there, it was a big deal, and law enforcement would definitely be there for those presentations. Something that we would like to do down in the Four Corners, there was a lot of generational acceptance of this type of behavior. It would be passed down from generation to generation. So just like anything, going into the schools when these kids are young and impressionable, trying to maybe bring about some change, something, at least hearing something different they may be hearing at home.
Yeah, and another person made a comment.
I can add in on that.
Go ahead, Jake.
I can add in on that. Through the Lincoln County Land Act, which was land sale in 2000 timeframe, then we're running Lincoln County Archaeological Initiative, and Rayette has done some excellent training in the past with the people in Lincoln County, especially the young ones. We have Project Archaeology that has been really, we had a project that we went into developed a curriculum for 3rd and 4th graders that was really very valuable. And that's probably one of the best things that I've done is that in the time that I've been here for 3 years, that we took the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders in from Pioche and went to one of our public sites, and there were like 30 of them, and I was a little concerned dealing with young people. I hadn't done it recently that, you hear about, oh, they're going to all be tuned to their phones and all that. And the first thing I asked them, what's the difference between paleontology and archaeology? And this one kid just, boom, had the answer. And so then it was, took him and showed him the importance of cultural resource preservation. And so we've been able to do a lot of that through the Lincoln County Archaeological Initiative and other things that Rayette's been very helpful in doing. With one grant, she was doing Atlatl workshop and just all kinds of
So there's a archaeology junior ranger book for Lincoln County. I can send a link out for that. That's a fun, quick and easy thing to do. It answers a lot of common questions on our website. We sent a link out for that earlier. We can do it again. There's outreach materials, and in there's a comic book, and it runs through all the common reasons people make excuses to take artifacts. Oh, I need to put it in a museum. No, they're full. Now I need to take it to somebody so people know it's here. No, those kinds of things. So it answers a lot of those questions that even as adults we have a hard time with. You're just not supposed to do it. That doesn't work for everybody. So if you need some reasons, that comic book actually is really helpful. We've done placemats at local restaurants because in Lincoln County there is that history of it being a family activity. How do you break that down? How do you get to the parents too? So I think all of us, if we had more time and resources, would do a lot more with education because we want to prevent it. But that's hopefully money will come that way. But we do the best we can with what we've got.
I forgot. I'm not typically involved in this myself, but our rangers in the Winnemucca district, every year, archaeologists, law enforcement, other members of the community do offer the Lovelock Cave Days. And so there is kids come from all over northern Nevada, schools come out there, and there's about a whole day of activities where they're trying to educate kids on the importance of these sites and the history of Nevada. So I totally spaced that one out. I just saw one more comment there about people carrying guns. 100%. Most people carry guns on public lands. 99% of people that do are not criminals, and it's their constitutional right, and doesn't really bother us. But it's when people are engaged in the commission of a felony and now they're armed, that certainly does become a little bit more dangerous situation. And again, I have plenty of examples when we've come across people in the act, they are armed. Luckily we were able to diffuse those situations, but that's a very good point. And because of that, I would never encourage anybody to confront somebody who may be engaged in this type of illegal activity.
Well, thank you, Logan, for coming and doing this on your Saturday. We really appreciate it.
No worries. I appreciate everything that you guys are doing out there to help us. So thanks all.
Thanks.
All right.